Thank you for joining us on this joyous Friday afternoon, because it means we've got through yet another week. So well done us. How did that happen? So I'm joined today with my colleague Esther Barrett, and we both work, as Edward says, in the GIST subject specialist team with a focus on digital practice. I'd just like to flag a few of my other GIST colleagues that are in the session as well. So we've got a range of GIST account managers that will be picking up on some of the conversations that take place in chat. And I see a couple of my other colleagues as well in the subject specialist team, such as Kelly Moat, Chris Thompson, and Mark Ayton. So welcome all. Esther, I think we should just very quickly open our webcams and just say a very quick hello to everybody so they can see the human faces behind the presentation today. So hopefully you can see two very dapper people. I hope you'd agree. Hello everyone. We're doing this thing for Fridays, which some of you might be doing on Twitter, which is the Dress Up Friday. So it's a kind of backlash against the slouchy dress that everybody is wearing now we're all working from home. So we're trying to make an effort on the Friday. So if you want to take part in that, it's just a little bit of fun. Esther, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I hope everyone appreciates the huge amount of effort I went to go to.
I should say as well, Esther did have a hat, but it was interfering with the headset, so Esther decided to take it off. Fantastic. What a great hat. I'm sure you'll agree. We will turn the webcams off now because we are a little bit conscious of bandwidth issues that we might have during this session. So we'll take those off for now, but we may come back to those later. Okay, so we want to start off with an icebreaker first of all. So many of you have already found the chat pane, which is great. But if you could just start off by introducing yourself by explaining what sector you're from and your job role, that would be very much appreciated because it helps to give us a flavour of who's in the room. And I think a lot of the value that comes out of these kind of sessions is the collaboration that you have with your peers during the session as well. So we'll be very much encouraging that collaboration throughout the next hour. So please just let everybody know your name, your sector, your job role in chat. That'd be great. And we'll just give you a minute or so to do that. And then I'll move you on to the next stage of the icebreaker, which is to ask the question, how digitally ready are you? Okay. It's a little bit of a loaded question because whether you're ready or not, you know, you've got to go with it at the moment. I think it's fair to say. Okay, I can see multiple people typing in chat. So while you type away and introduce your sector and job role, I'll just move on and explain what I would like you to do on this next part of the icebreaker. So what we're asking is the question, how digitally ready are you? And we've used the familiar traffic light system, the red, amber and green that you can see on the left of the slide. And as you can see from the three sections on the slide, what we'd like you to do is reflect on your own individual circumstances at the moment and just think about where you are in terms of digital readiness. So if, for example, you're already used to working remotely, you're very confident collaborating with your peers and learners online, and you've got lots of digital content prepared already for your learners to access, you'd be in the top ready segment. If you're slightly less prepared and perhaps a little bit more apprehensive about collaborating with peers online, and you don't always work remotely, you'd fall into the amber. And I don't want to say if you're in panic stage, but if you're at the lower third, this is perhaps all new to you and you've had to kind of upskill really quickly. So what we're going to do now is enable the drawing panel, which should just pop up on your screen to the left of the slide. And you'll see a pointer on screen pointing to a rectangle, which is about the fifth icon down, I think fourth icon down. There's a little arrow in the bottom right of the rectangle. And if you click on that, it creates a sidebar. And if you select the star, people have done lots of rectangles instead of stars. You can always undo by doing the undo button. That's great. And just drop your star in the relevant section of the slide. Oh, that's brilliant. We've got Lots and lots of people finding that. Lots of rectangles disappearing as I speak, which is great. You can enlarge your stars if you want. So the higher up the slide, the more digitally ready you are. Oh, fantastic. I knew somebody would do a large one. And somebody's worked out how to change the colour of the stars as well. So that's wonderful. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of the expertise in the room. And Edward mentioned the green tick icon. Just give me a green tick when you've placed your star so we know when to move on. So that's where the person with a raised hand icon.
Congratulations to the person who put the massive star in and realised how to get rid of it again. Well done.
Yes, yeah, that's quite an achievement. Well done. It is all anonymous, of course, so if anybody does kind of abuse the drawing panel, we wouldn't know. But it's just a bit of fun, really, so you can see where you are. But it is really encouraging to see that I think the vast majority of the stars are in that top third or middle third, with very few being in that panic stage. But if you are in that kind of lower third, don't worry, there'll be lots of sharing of experiences and approaches in this session. So we'll try and surface some of those through the chat or getting people to open up their mics as well. So don't worry. So just give me a green tick if you've placed your star and you're happy for us to move on. And as soon as we've got quite a few green ticks, we'll clear this. I can see quite a lot of people have found it. So just to remind you, it's the
as well as, or perhaps in lieu of a green tick. So I'm taking that as a green tick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Esther. Okay, so we'll take the drawing tools away from you now, because you could all get carried away with that if we let you loose on it for too long. And we'll move on to the next part. So these are the learning objectives for today's online drop-in, which you will have seen on our website. Now, just to emphasize the fact that the previous two online briefings that took place were very much webinars where we broadcasted lots of information and shared things that we were doing in GIST. We want to take much more of a flipped approach in this session. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear what your stories are and how you're addressing some of these issues on screen. So we'll be coming back to these questions in the latter part of the online drop-in. Okay, but before we move on to that, I just want to flag some of the resources that came out of the previous two online briefings. If you didn't access the previous two online briefings, we've got recordings available on both of them, and Esther's just very kindly popping the links into chat for you, so you can catch up with those after this. We've also got a specially dedicated blog responding to coronavirus that has been populated with lots of top tips on how to approach different issues that have arose as a result of our current situation. And I just want to give a very quick shout out as well. If you are interested in sharing one of your stories on our blog, please do get in touch with us, because we would very much like to work with you to kind of surface that good practice that's out there. So if you could just give me a green tick if you are currently doing something and you're happy for us to blog about it, that would be really useful for us, and then we can get in touch with you after the online drop-in and work together to share that with the wider community. So I can see Anthony Martin, thank you very much for that green tick. And I know we may have approached a couple of you individually. Jim Harris is also doing something. Thank you, Jim. That's much appreciated. And we've got Paul Shaw and Rosie Hare. Thank you, Rosie. And Vereen Booth as well. So thank you. So a few names there for you to jot down, Esther. And we'll catch up with you afterwards and discuss how we can promote that on our blog. So thank you very much for that. We've also got a specially dedicated DIGO group, the social bookmarking site. So if you're looking for resources relating to COVID-19 and how universities and colleges are planning for it and responding to it, that would be a really good starting point for you to explore some of those links. So again, we'll drop the link into the chat pane for you so you can have a look at that afterwards. I'm saying we'll drop the link in. I'm putting pressure on you now, Esther, to drop that in while I move on to the next slide. And finally, many of you will already be aware of this, but we do have a community of practice specifically set up on our Microsoft Teams site, which is all about putting you in touch with peers across the sector so you can tap into those shared experiences and develop new approaches to addressing some of these challenges that we're facing. So if you're not a member of our Teams community, do let us know and we can sign you up and get you added into that. We've also got, I'll just give a very quick mention as well to Kelly Moat, who is our GIST subject specialist in accessibility. We've got a dedicated community of practice around accessibility as well, and we'll be touching on some of those issues later in the session. So if you do want to share the link to that, Kelly, please do so in chat. Okay, right, on to the flipped part of the online drop-in. So you will have noticed at the start when you booked onto the session that we posed 3 particular questions for you. So hopefully you've had a little bit of time to reflect on these 3 questions and share some of your approaches that you've had relating to these. So again, just to reinforce the different ways that you can respond to these questions during the next half an hour or so. If you are happy to open up a mic and you'd like to discuss any of these questions and elaborate a little bit more, please use the raised hand icon and we'll try and get to you in turn. I am conscious that we've got 100 participants in this online drop-in, so we will try our best to get around everybody, but apologies in advance if we don't manage to do that because, of course, we've only got 45 minutes or so. So depending on how many questions we get, we'll try and address as many as we can. But also, if you don't have a microphone or you'd prefer to just type your responses in chat, please just use the chat pane. That's absolutely fine as well. So we might ask you to expand on your point slightly, but if you want to just do that in chat, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so what are the 3 questions that we want to ask you? So we'll take the first question to start off with, and we'll roughly try and spend about 15 minutes on each question if we can. So we will have to move on depending on how much discussion gets generated on each of these questions. So the first question was, how do we enable our staff to quickly and confidently move to teaching online? Now this is quite a broad question, so take a few moments to think about it. And while you do, I just want to share one of the things that came up at the AOC online drop-in earlier this week, which some of my colleagues in the further education sector will have attended, no doubt. And that was about creating a practice area for staff to try out some of the digital online collaboration tools with their learners in a really safe space before they did it with learners. I thought that was a really, really good suggestion. So can we just move the chat slightly, Esther, just so people can, oh, they can see the question at the top of the chat pane, that's fine. So I'm going to stop talking now. So don't forget, you can either type into the chat pod that's just come up over the presentation screen, or if you want to open your mic, use the raised hand icon. Okay, we've got a couple of people with their hands up, so that's great. I think, Esther, can we get Paul Shaw from Manchester University to share his experiences?
Right, give me a moment, Paul. It's actually chaos at this back end behind here. You can't see.
Sorry.
I seem very calm, but my little legs are paddling like mad. Just trying to keep up.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologise. There's a few questions coming through, from some technical questions coming through on the in the chat as well. Somebody's asking about the size of the chat pane and so on. So because it's fine on my screen, I can't really tell what to do to help anybody that it's very small with. So you just need to try and open a mic, yeah?
Yeah.
For Scotty there.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Is your mic enabled? You just need to click on the mic icon at the top of your screen. You've got 4 icons, so it's near the raised
You'll
hand
need to actually
icon.
enable them, Scott, to do that, if that's been done already. My mic should be working now. This is Paul Shaw.
Yes, it is. Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Do you want to just introduce yourself first of all?
Yes, of course. I'm Paul Shaw from Manchester University. My role in teaching is as academic lead for problem-based learning for years 1 and 2 in the medical school. And
Thanks, Paul.
we closed the university, and we have quite a bit of teaching to continue with, obviously. And so we primarily deal with groups of 12 students that are working as teams that ordinarily would come together in a live room with a tutor. And so we're having to move that scenario online so that the students can have a free-flowing discussion and formulate their learning agendas. So what we've done to upskill the tutors so that they can feel confident and the students can feel confident doing this is produced a number of how-to videos very, very quickly, just going through how to access the various systems. So we're using Collaborate and we're using Zoom. So what we've done is make those how-to videos and send them out so tutors can have a go. But we've also introduced some live training sessions for tutors. So tutors can log on in groups of 10 and ask questions and have a go themselves using Collaborate and Zoom.
Thank you, Paul. That's really useful. I know a lot of people have been creating short, bite-sized video content as well. And it's almost as if we planted you in the audience, to be honest, because we're going to talk about video content slightly later on in this session as well. So has that gone down really well with the students? Do they really take to the videos?
So at this stage, they've hit the Easter break. So we've done some practice sessions with students. And I've actually generated a video with the students giving some feedback as well. And yes, they definitely feel that they're getting a good experience. It takes a little bit of getting used to, of course, for everybody. But they feel they're getting a good educational experience using Zoom in particular for small group teaching, where it's quite important to have a free-flowing discussion. It's actually quite useful for the students to see each other, and Zoom seems to have a very stable video platform for that. So yes, so far, what little feedback we've been able to get from students with a small number of sessions that we've actually run, they do seem to like Zoom, and it is working. One of the problems we have come across is that we have students all over the world, so there's a time issue because students in different time zones, and also the technical issues associated with connectivity as well for some students.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. We did do a blog post fairly recently as well, actually, on things to take into account when video conferencing with students. So just a few things to be mindful of, which might be useful. So we'll share that link in the chat later on as well. But one of the really good examples that I heard about at the AOC online webinar earlier in the week was at Basingstoke College of Technology, where what you were saying, Paul, about we all feel slightly anxious when it comes to video recording ourselves and putting that out there with our students. I completely identify with that, and I'm sure many people in the session do too. But at Basingstoke College, what they did was they had the principal model that good behaviour that he wanted to see from his staff and share some of that video content as well. So I thought it was really nice and refreshing to see the senior leadership team take that kind of modelling role across the whole organisation. So thank you very much for that, Paul. If you could mute your mic for me, that would be fantastic, because I'd just like to hear from Jim Harris as well, if that's okay. So Jim, your mic's been enabled, so you just have to click on the microphone icon at the top of your screen.
No problem at all. Can everyone hear me?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, loud and clear.
Hi, I'm Jim Harris. I'm a learning designer at the University of Northampton, and I just picked up from some of the comments in the question chat. One of the key things that we found is not having people feel as if they've got to rush to suddenly take on a lot of new digital capabilities, not suddenly jumping into new systems they haven't experienced before, but a gradual increase in their confidence in using some of the resources. So it can be as simple as, now we're using Collaborate as well. We try as best as we can to encourage participation in, but then also reflect on the way that they felt the meeting went and how they can use that for their own meetings with students. So we're trying as best as possible to facilitate learning, but not have a, here is a 20-minute video that talks you through how to use Blackboard Collaborate, but really through the behaviour that we can express to them, be empathetic to their own skills, and then give them that confidence to come back and just have the informal meetings just to get used to the technology, where they can have those, as you said earlier, safe spaces to fail, but also to gain the correct support.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach, Jim. I can see Jackie's backing that up in chat as well about introduce the tools slowly. Staff are under an enormous amount of pressure right now, so having to take on lots and lots of new platforms is quite hard. So building that confidence in a safe area is a really good approach to take. Thank you. Right, I'll pause now because I can't see anybody else with their hand up. That's absolutely fine, by the way. Don't feel that you have to open your mic up. But I'll pause and just give a couple of minutes silence for people to interact with the chat pane, because there's some really good things coming up there as well. So please do share your experiences in chat and read through what people are saying. I do like Paul's comment in chat as well about making sure you cater to the kind of social needs of your staff as well by having separate kind of Yammer groups set up so they can have more of those kind of informal discussions with other staff. I think that's a really good approach, Paul.
Yes, and just to add to that, I wanted to mention Pete's comment there about having virtual coffee spaces. I've heard a lot of people have put together sort of informal spaces, perhaps sometimes for one-to-one tutorials, but sometimes for more social ways of people sharing experiences. And it's been a really strong theme throughout all of this when people have been sharing what they've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Esther. I think the current situation's brought out a lot of really kind of good feeling towards each other in terms of how we can support each other, and we've seen that quite a lot in the news lately, and definitely in education as well, because it's been a massive change for everybody, but the support has just been immense, really.
Interesting that Ben has used.
Okay, just to let you know, sorry, go on, Esther.
I only wanted to mention that Ben has used the word experiment, and maybe that's something that people are a little bit, have up to now been perhaps a little bit not that confident about experimenting, and now we kind of have to experiment, so perhaps that's something which has been sort of thrust upon us, really. But as long as we know that it's okay to fail, and it's not everything's going to work perfectly first time. So just thought it was a useful use of the word.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, just to let you know, we're going to move on to the next question in a few moments. So if you could just finish off typing the sentence that you want to in the chat pane. I'll just give you another minute, then we will need to move on, I'm afraid. But don't worry, we will capture all of these chat pods afterwards and share them with you, so you will have all these for reference. And if you've got any useful links of any of the things that you've been doing, do pop them into the chat pods as well.
Just like Jim Harris has just done, in fact, with his Open Blackboard site, that he's just put he's just put a link into the general chat. So if anyone can't just see the general chat very well, if you scroll down to the bottom of the general chat now, you'll see Jim's link in there. Thank you very much for that, Jim.
Great, thanks, Esther. Okay, can we close that chat pod down now and move on to the next question? Okay, I see everybody's suddenly stopped typing now, which is great. So sorry for cutting you a little bit short, but I'm conscious of the time. So, okay, fantastic. So we'll move on to the second question that we posed, which is very much about how do we provide a consistent experience for learners. Okay, so we've got a couple of things that we wanted to discuss on this, because one of the things that got picked up earlier was the idea of creating short bite-sized video content for learners, which I think a lot of people are doing, and it's really, really useful to do. We wanted to share with you just a quick tip, really, when you're making the videos, on something to consider from our accessibility specialist, Kelly Moat. So do you want to just share the video, Esther, and we'll just play that for people first. It's only a minute long.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a subject specialist at JISC. I focus on accessibility, but I've also been teaching courses online for many years now. Adding little videos is a great way to quickly communicate information and to demonstrate things. Obviously, what if your learners are deaf or have a hearing loss or just don't have their headphones with them? Adding automated subtitles is a great way to make sure your videos are accessible. I'm using an app called Clip-O-Matic that automatically adds captions when I'm speaking. I can edit them before I save the video in case it's made any mistakes. Then quickly upload to social media or email. If you want to know more about subtitling and automated solutions, you can join the accessibility community team. And we've got a channel totally dedicated to subtitling and transcription. Google JISC accessibility.
Great, thank you for that, Kelly. I think we've got Kelly with us as well. So if you do have any questions around accessibility, do please pop them into the chat pane and we'll try and pick up on those as well. So yeah, something to consider. Do you add subtitles to the short videos that you do? Because it's got lots of benefits for all learners, really. So something to consider. But on that question of creating a consistent experience for learners, again, if you want to use the raised hand icon, if you want to open up your mic and share an experience, please do so. Alternatively, feel free to keep typing in the chat pod in the middle of your screen. We've got Louise with a hand up. Louise, do you want to open your mic? It's just the microphone icon at the top of your screen, Louise. You just need to click on that and hopefully you should be able to talk. Okay, maybe Anthony, do you want to open your mic while Louise tries to orientate herself with her headset?
Sure, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting question, actually, because this is one of my kind of key things I've been talking about at the college for a while, is this concept that I think standardization is really important when it comes to this kind of centralized program, certainly for staff members anyway, in knowing that whatever you put together is easy to follow, that it almost teaches itself the flow as you go along. So rather than having 20 different people create 20 different things with 20 different designs and then pull resources from, 4 or 5 different digital badging platforms and then resources from Excel, I think there needs to be a bit of consistent approach and standardization behind all of that. Otherwise, everybody's going to get incredibly confused, which has certainly been, I think, our experience initially, where we were trying to be quite maybe well-intentioned and sharing, whatever we can, whatever best practice we can find. But it just seems to overload people in a cognitive sense, really. I think it's just too many approaches,
Yes.
and I think simplicity is therefore quite an important thing to consider.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. And if you've got any links from what you've been doing at your institution, please do share them in the chat pod so other people can
Sure.
see. That'd be really useful. Thank you. Louise, you've still got your hand up. Did you want to open your mic?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, Louise.
I'm really sorry, it was my browser that was blocking the mic in the end.
It's fine, no problem.
I noticed a couple of people had said that they wanted to make videos, but the files were too big for them to put on things like Moodle. I've done a subscription for Loom, which is an American site, and it stores the videos on its own platform. So all you end up with is a link that takes you to the video. So that is really easy. Loom Pro, they've decided to make free forever now for teachers. And if you email them directly, they will whitelist your entire institution so that if any teachers sign up to it themselves, it will automatically put them on Loom Pro for free forever. So yeah, I found it's brilliant.
Oh, fantastic. I've not heard of that one, Louise. Could you put the link into the chat pod for us? Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick scan to see if anybody else has got their hand raised. While I scroll.
Edward has said that people have been giving us so much, writing so much to us that one of the chat panes is nearly full. And Edward's going to close it down. I hate to do this to you when you're in mid-flow, but close it down and then start a new one. But we promise you that every bit of information is being saved and recorded, and we will obviously feed that back to you all.
I think that's a good live demonstration of how many of our platforms are being tested to the limit because they're not used to the amount of traffic they're getting. And we've certainly experienced that in Adobe Connect and some of the other platforms we've been using lately. I'm sure you have
Absolutely.
too. Great. So you're going to close the current panel down?
The regular chat, it's the general chat at the bottom.
Oh, the regular chat. Okay,
quite sure
great.
which one it was, but it was the general one. So that's great. That's been started again now. So please do resume, and you will be able to get that information back when you get the resources for this session.
Fantastic.
And Louise has just posted Loom again in there for us.
I can see that. Thank you, Louise. Are you from a university or a further education college, Louise?
I'm from a sixth form college. We're 2,300 students.
Sixth form. Great, thank you. Okay, I can't see any other raised hand icons in the participants pane, so I will take that as you're ready to move on to our third and final question in a minute or so. So if you were in mid-sentence typing into chat, I will just give you another minute to finish off what you're typing before I move us on.
Scott, I've just been demoted, so if you could promote me again, I'd be very grateful.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Perfect, thank you.
I appreciate that the time has been quite tight to respond to some of these questions, so please do carry on the conversations in our Teams Community of Practice site. There'll be a lot more time in there. I know an hour is nowhere near enough time to do justice to all three of these questions, but hopefully it starts to give you some ideas on approaches that you could try. Okay. If you could just finish off what you're typing now, please, because we'll just close the current chat pod down to question 2. Thank you. If we could close that one and then move on to the final question.
I feel terrible because I can see somebody's still typing.
I know.
I really
don't like. It's like cutting somebody off in mid sentence, isn't it? It's not.
Right. That's it. I'm going to close it now. Thank you so much to Amy for just finishing off that comment. And now I'm going to move question 3 into the pane.
Okay. Great. Okay. So the third and final question, a bit of an open question, really. So of course, the boundaries between these 3 questions are a little bit blurred, so there's quite a bit of overlap, I think it's fair to say. But the final question was a bit of a catch-all question on what synchronous and asynchronous digital activities work best for your learners. So what kind of things are you doing in terms of activities? So we've deliberately put the terms synchronous and asynchronous in there to emphasize that not everything has to be this kind of experience with your learners. It doesn't have to be live, because of course that's very often the pressure point on the bandwidth and everything else, and people have got other family commitments at the moment, so they can't always do things synchronously. So very often the asynchronous activities are in fact more useful for many learners. So if you've got some good examples of different things that you've been doing, again, if you want to use the raised hand icon, if you want to just share your experience, or if you just want to type into chat, please go ahead with the chat. Pleased to see that Jim Harris has put constructive alignment in there. I'm just wondering if Jim's attended one of our curriculum confidence workshops where we talk about constructive alignment. I can see Mark's mentioning video creation Flipgrid. I'd be intrigued to know a little bit more about that, Mark, because we've been experimenting with the Flipgrid plugin for Microsoft Teams, which I know a lot of people are using Microsoft Teams at the moment, but the Flipgrid plugin is worth looking at. So is that what you meant? Feel free to open your mic if you want to, Mark, or just pop into chat. I can see Anthony's mentioned Wakelet as well. I really like that one for curating lots of useful resources and links. Again, a very nifty little app that you can use, web-based as well. Free to use, so nice little tool. Good to see Catherine Bone in the session, one of my former colleagues. Hello, Catherine. Synchronous Microsoft Teams, asynchronous forums and wikis. Yeah.
Something I've done in the past as well, I don't know if anyone else has tried it, but when you're synchronously chatting with learners, you can at the same time bring up things like Mentimeter polls and even Kahoot quizzes at a distance. It's quite entertaining because you can show them your screen and then they can interact with your quizzes and polls and so on using their phone or another device, and it can get quite meta really when it comes to using tools within tools, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you're not all as shy as you're pretending to be, so if anybody wants to open their mic, don't forget you can use the raised hand icon and we'll get you to open up your mic and share an experience. Sometimes I think it's much, much quicker than typing into the chat pod.
Video. Somebody's mentioned videos with inbuilt quizzes. I was using H5P for that, which you can build a quiz into a video which has been brought over from YouTube, so that the video becomes interactive. But also, I think Edpuzzle has a similar functionality as one of its ways of engaging, and a colleague Laura there has just put in eStream as well. So I think I've come across eStream too. So that's a really good way of +1 for H5P, says Jim. I think it's fantastic, and it's got a lot of very interesting ways of engaging with learners through resources. But of course, there is a paid-for version and a free version.
Yeah, you've got an endorsement there, Esther, as well from Louise on Kahoot, who's also a big fan.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Kahoot. I was in a conference recently, and 200 people in front of me, and somebody put their hand up and said, "Do you think Kahoot is overused?" And I said, "What a fantastic question to be asked, that we're even asking if some technology in the classroom has now got to the point where we're thinking it's overused." And I said, "Well, it can be used badly and it can be used well." So I kind of left it at that, really.
Yeah.
H5P integrated into Moodle, says Andy. Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's such a great tool.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment also here?
Nearpods?
Yeah, of course you can. Please just say your name and introduce yourself for everybody, and then.
Paul Shaw again here from Manchester University. Just to comment on synchronous activity, really, with large groups, as we can see here. One of the benefits of online teaching to large groups is that you can interact with your audience, and the best way to do that is what you guys are doing. Clearly, it's sort of team teaching. If you have somebody manning the chat box, they can filter the questions, and this is a great way of really interacting with your audience and giving your students, to some extent, a better experience than they can get in a live lecture, or certainly a different experience. It brings a new dimension to the large group synchronous activity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I mean, what Esther and myself always try and do with these sessions is try and make the participants part of the presentation. I think when you're involved in speaking and the delivery and the direction of it all, you're so much more invested in the learning that's taking place rather than being broadcasted to. So yeah, absolutely endorse that approach.
I mean, we want you to focus on what's happening. We want you to share. We want you to feel it in some ways that it's a fun experience as well as a very productive and a very enlightening experience. And if you're enjoying the experience, I think that will give you a lot of motivation to keep to take part in the experience a lot more. So I think there's a multitude of things that could go on, and I think that's really interesting that you say that those techniques for engaging a large distance audience can also sometimes work for a large face-to-face audience as well. You know, how do you get a large lecture theatre full of people, you know, engaging with yourself and each other and coming into collaboration and all of those kinds of things that it would be lovely to do. And perhaps this will make it easier for us afterwards to understand how we can engage a real audience, a real life audience in one room with us, as well as this kind of distance audience.
Can I just come in with a point? Because I made a point about not liking, I'm not very keen on our staff doing live teaching, and somebody's asked me why. It's probably easier to talk it through. We're 16 to 19 sixth form college in a deprived area. So there are lots of pressures on technology within households where we might have a household with one laptop being shared amongst 3 or 4 children sometimes. So for our staff, live teaching, I just don't think would be appropriate. It would put too much pressure on students to try and be on a laptop at a particular time when there are other pressures in the house. There isn't a quiet room, that kind of thing. And we also have a lot of staff with very young families who are trying to juggle their own homeschooling as well as teaching their students. So I think it's very difficult to stick to a set timetable. So it just seemed easy to explain that rather than try and type all of that.
Thank you for sharing that. It's quite interesting that the other day at the AOC online webinar, they called it, with lots of people coming through and sharing their experiences. I think some people are having experiences where that hasn't happened. I'm completely get where you're coming from. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to argue against you or anything. This is you've just triggered that somebody said that they were surprised that more people came to the timetable sessions than when they had it face to face in rooms, and they weren't really sure about why. But it obviously is contextual. Some learners are going to be easier for some learners, it's going to be more difficult for some learners, and I think every situation is going to be different. So thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's really important to understand that there's such a variety of our groups of learners, and we can't, one size does definitely not fit all.
Yeah. I just want to pick up on Pete's point and Rosie's point in the chat as well, Esther, because I think it's really important that what we're not necessarily saying is the way we're delivering online learning is absolutely perfect at the moment. It's what gets us through this current situation. And I think it's okay for us to be a little bit imperfect in the current situation. And we should give our staff that kind of freedom to be a little bit imperfect. Okay, I think we're getting quite close to the end. Jim, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to open your mic and say a final point?
I just wanted to pick up on that very last thing that you were saying. Yes, this is for us to get through this period, but it does need that senior support and agreement so that people don't feel penalised. We very early on had a message coming out saying we need to be results driven, not clock watching while people are working in this environment. So having that results focus, then making sure you've got the commitment to your student body and you're clear on where you get your lines of support. As long as people stay communicating, I think it's a very positive way. And again, for things such as this, for us to be able to share between institutions and our own opportunities to explore this very strange time with all the demands it has on us and everyone else.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think the communication is absolutely vital, isn't it? And the kind of behaviours being modelled by the senior leadership team are really important in giving staff that kind of understanding of what is expected of them in these times. Okay, I think we're going to close the final chat pod down now, but before we do close the session, what we'd just like to finish off with, if you like, is one, to remember what I mentioned earlier about the blog post. So we touched on lots and lots of really good points in this session in a very short space of time. But if you do want to elaborate on some of these points and maybe turn it into a blog post with us to share your individual stories, that would be absolutely great. So please do get in touch. Couple of things as well. We've got a pod where we just want to ask you very quickly, Edward mentioned it at the start, when you would like the next online briefing to take place. So if you could just type your response in, because we're conscious that we are running up into Easter now, and some of you may be experiencing webinar fatigue, because I know we've had lots of information thrown at us over the last 2 or 3 weeks. So let us know what in the chat pod on screen when you'd like the next online briefing to take place. Would you like us to do another one like this, where it's a bit more of a flipped approach, where you can share your experiences? Or would you like to hear a little bit more from what other people are doing across the sector? Would you like us to get some speakers involved? Let us know, and we're quite happy to take the steer from yourselves and try and tailor whatever session we put on to what you want. So we'll just leave that pod open for a minute or so for you to type in. We'll also send out an evaluation link to you afterwards. So if you want to tell us in a little bit more detail, please feel free to use the online evaluation form that we'll send you as well. So yes, apologies if it was a little bit condensed in the hour that we had. But hopefully that gave you some insights into different things to explore and some follow-up as well on what approaches you can take. Okay, I'll just wait for a few more responses in the poll before we close it down. Thank you very much. Go on, Esther.
I can just mention the names that I hurriedly scribbled on the back of the envelope
Yeah.
whilst my little ones were going mad earlier on. I had Anthony Martin, Jim Harris, Pam, I didn't catch her surname, Kat McDonough, Jim T, Paul, I can't read my own writing for his surname, Rosie Hare and Sue Dewey. If I didn't read out, it will get your surnames and obviously the details from the registration forms. If there's anybody that also would like to participate in helping us do a joint blog posting or something like that, please do let us know. But all the people on my rough list, we will be in touch.
Great, thank you, Esther, and thank you for filling in the poll. So we'll close that down now. And our contact details are there on screen. We've got a few account managers in the online briefing that I mentioned earlier as well. So if you want to reach out to your account manager, you can use the link on screen. We've got a landing page where we've got all the support and resources that we've discussed in this session available from that one link. And of course, if you've got any individual questions that you'd like to follow up with either Esther or myself, our email contact details are on screen as well. So just thank you very much for taking part. Thank you for contributing to the session today. I should just put my webcam on as well and join Esther in waving you all goodbye. Thank you for taking part. We will stop in the room for the last 5 minutes or so. So if anybody wants to hang on and follow up with anything in particular, please do so. But other than that, we'll just... Esther, go on.
A recording will be available, and Edward just posted a link to the evaluation form as well, but I think that will be coming to you anyway as well.
Great, thank you, Esther. And to exit the room, just click on the meeting link at the top, and you just click on the Exit Adobe Connect if you've not found that already. So thank you again for taking part, and we'll see you all soon.